Welcome to the Fat Fuel Family Podcast, where every week Danny and Maura Vega discuss topics that help families live a healthy and active lifestyle with their little ones, including nutrition and training, peaceful parenting, education, and mindset. To stay up to date, make sure to hit subscribe on this podcast and check out the blog at www.fatfuel.family. You can also find them on Facebook and Instagram at dannyvega.ms, at fatfueledmom, and at fatfueledkids, and Fat Fueled Family on YouTube. Enjoy the show.
Hey guys, I want to take a minute to make a quick shout out to our sponsors, Optimal Carnivore. You've heard us talk about how important organ meats are. They're some of the most nutrient-dense foods on the planet. Now for people like me and my oldest son Desmond, it's easy to eat things that turn most people off because if you tell us it's healthy, we're down for whatever. But for my other son Dean and Maura, and I suspect a lot of you, not so much. You can make things like our organ meat burgers, but that also requires some effort, and you still may not like the taste. Optimal Carnivore sources 100% grass-fed organ meats from New Zealand, freeze-drying the organs and encapsulating them into convenient bovine gelatin capsules. Unlike a lot of areas in the US, New Zealand still has a lot of rich soil, lush greenery, and one of the cleanest environments on Earth. They currently have a grass-fed organ complex that contains 9 different organs, including beef liver, brain, thymus, heart, kidney, spleen, pancreas, lung, and gallbladder, and they have a grass-fed liver product. These products are perfect for people who are traveling or still trying to develop an appreciation for organ meats. Optimal Carnivore covers your bases at home or while traveling, and their products are 100% grass-fed and grass-finished and free of hormones, pesticides, antibiotics, and GMOs. The mission over at Optimal Carnivore is to make it easy for people to consume the most nutrient-dense foods on the planet. They also plant one tree for every product sold, which helps the environment. Head to amazon.com/optimalcarnivore and use the code VEGASAFE10 to receive 10% off all of their products. Welcome to the Fat Fuel Family Podcast. I'm your host and I'm joined by the love of my life. How are you, my love?
I'm doing great today.
Awesome. All right. So we are super excited because we have someone today that I had just met over the internet. But I believe your brother-in-law.
Yes. He's
Okay,
the best, right?
Yeah, I know Matt.
Is that Matt?
Matt and I go back.
KetoCon, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, he's great.
Yeah. So, but I want to give everybody a proper introduction of who we're talking to. So Autumn Smith is with us today. Autumn suffered from debilitating digestive issues and crippling anxiety for most of her life. Specialist after specialist told her nothing could be done and she was ready to give up. But as one final attempt at a life free of health issues, Autumn decided to harness the power of whole foods. She cleaned up her diet and in just 30 days, her IBS was cured. But that was just the beginning. She also had less anxiety, was mentally sharper, and a bubbly inside of her that she forgot existed came back. Since then, Autumn has dedicated her life to helping others harness the power of whole foods to live vibrant lives. In 2013, she and her husband, Chaz, launched Paleo Valley, a company dedicated to helping people get the essential nutrients they need without added sugars, grains, and other harmful ingredients. But they didn't stop there. After learning about the healing powers of grass-fed, pasture-raised meat, both for our bodies and the planet, Autumn and Chaz started their next venture. In 2018, they launched Wild Pastures, a regenerative meat delivery service that sends 100% grass-fed, pasture-raised meat directly to your doorstep. We're going to talk to her today about, just a few different issues, one of which you guys may recognize from my KetoCon talk, which is basically mental health. So welcome to the show, Autumn.
Welcome.
Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here, and we're just excited to be making this connection.
Yeah,
this
absolutely.
Is great. We love making connections like this. So we have a lot to talk about, and we're excited to learn more about you. But we always lead off with the question, what is the most critical problem that you are currently trying to solve?
There are 2 problems I'm trying to solve. The first is, how do I get my dissertation done and run a company and also be a very present parent?
Oh, I forgot you're a PhD candidate, right?
That's right.
Yeah, I'm getting yes. But also the professional problem is trying to ascertain the nutritional differences in animal products dependent upon how they're raised. So that's a more practical problem. I'm very fascinated by the topic, but most of my time goes to being a very present parent as well. trying.
Yes, that's something that we are
Yes.
very focused on too. Now, the dissertation, does it have anything to do with that difference between, the different, the way animals are raised and the difference in the meat?
It does. It's going to be really great. Do you guys know Dr. Stefan Van Vliet?
Sounds very familiar.
Maybe.
Yeah, he's been doing some really cool research, and he's out of Utah State. He used to be at Duke, and he's done research comparing grass-fed beef to plant-based burgers. And what I get to join in on, which is going to be really fun, is a trial he's running that's comparing regeneratively raised beef. So it's a crossover trial, meaning that the participants will do each of the arms, so in a different period of time. So they're going to eat regeneratively raised beef, and then they're going to have their levels of inflammation after the fact measured. And then they're going to eat conventionally raised beef, and then they're going to eat a plant-based burger. And he's most interested in, does the level of inflammation change depending upon how the animal was raised? And it was really inspired by a study that was done back in 2010 in Australia, where they looked at kangaroo meat, which is wild, fed grass, and then looked at conventionally raised beef, Wagyu specifically. And then they found that the levels of inflammation after a meal were significantly lower in the wild meat. But of course, it's kangaroo to beef comparison, so it's confounded. So I will be jumping in and doing data analysis to see on that trial. And then I will probably focus on the fatty acids specifically and how they
Very
change.
interesting.
Yeah.
We love that. Yeah.
Yeah, I gotta be honest, I'm way more excited about the inflammatory response because I definitely am always curious to see like what the differences in omega-3s are. But the way I understand it, there's such a small percentage of that fat that's like that's unsaturated, that's not saturated, that, let's say you get like a 30% increase in omega-3s, but it's such a small percentage. That's why the inflammatory response is like, okay, let's not talk about features, let's talk about benefits, because if there is a difference in inflammatory response, let's cut past the omega-3 thing and let's just talk about, or at least it gives it a why. It gives it some context to why it would be important to have higher omega-3s.
Yes, fascinating too. And on that note, there's like a new fatty acid kind of on the block. There's EPA and there's DHA, and these are these long chain omegas. And then DPA is kind of like an intermediary, and it can become both different types. And we haven't really looked at that at all. Like if you look at the literature, that's kind of not been paid attention to. And so I think measuring that and taking that into consideration might make for a more compelling case. But you're right. Like the actual amount of omega-3s is not huge unless you're eating organ meats, and then it can be significantly higher. But these levels of secondary compounds, Dr. Fred Provenza and Van Vliet have done a lot of research on them: phenols, terpenoids, carotenoids, things we typically consider to be plant-based nutrients that are anti-diabetic, anti-inflammatory, antifungal. They have a number of well-demonstrated benefits. What they've found in their research is that these compounds change dramatically the more grass and diverse forages an animal's fed, the higher these levels of compounds, which may be one of the things contributing to the lower amounts of inflammation. And Dr. Provenza actually thinks that they probably have a very marked impact on satiety as well, which I find fascinating, right? Because in the wild, when animals are self-selecting, these nutrients kind of tell them when to stop, right? And we've kind of gotten them out. And so I just think it's going to have a number of fascinating implications that we get to explore. But yes, the post-meal inflammatory response is the one that we'll look at. And I'm really excited about it. So I'm glad you guys are too.
Well, I'm also just fascinated by what you just said, because like when you think about the modern approach to nutrition is like this sterilized, what are your macros? It's like we're looking, it's like a calorie is not a calorie. If you're looking at, prophylactically, antibacterial, what do you call it? Antibiotic animals, that are sterile, and so they're also not foraging, like you said, in these wild areas. That makes a lot of sense. And, we talk a lot about the different forms of satiety, like you have the mechanical stretch of the stomach, you have that nutrient thermostat that you're talking about that,
Yeah.
it may not just be amino acids. It may be also these other things that the body's like, ooh, that's good. We got what we needed.
Right.
Let's stop. So very fascinating
minerals
what
and
you're talking about.
micros.
Yeah.
I know.
Yeah.
And I just think there's this new metabolomics. It's this level of analysis that we haven't ever had before, right? We were just discovering vitamins in the beginning of the 1900s, right? And like we've learned a lot, but like we're still at the very, very beginning. And so when you can do these metabolomic analysis, you can look at hundreds, thousands of different compounds, and you'll see in the research that Dr. Provenza did, where you look at plant-based burgers versus beef, grass-fed beef specifically, 90% of the metabolites are different, even though their nutrition label is the same, right? Or very similar. And there's tens of thousands of nutrients that we can consume. 100 of them we keep a database of. 12 to 13 are on nutrition labels, but we're missing, I think, the bigger piece. But I think we're on the brink, and we're going to begin to appreciate how much it matters, the way that animals are raised.
Got a
At
lot of
least
work
that's
to
my
do.
hypothesis.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. I mean, then
Yeah.
and then the key is the education.
Exactly. And then at least we have the tool to educate the people, to show like, no, this is real. This is what happens. And then people will take it more serious. I mean, obviously people like us, we're always kind of assume and kind of know that it's probably gonna the result that we're gonna get. We already see it with certain things, like even especially with like raw dairy. A lot of people that think they're lactose intolerant, or that they think that they have a dairy sensitivity, there's been studies done. It's a small group of people, but where the results are like outstanding. It's like 70% of the
or
people
80,
who thought they had a sensitivity to dairy when they consume raw dairy, raised, grass-fed.
Well, they get the lactase. No,
and
it's
it's a
raw.
living food.
Yeah.
It's like what you said, right? We're eating dead food. And we're living beings. So these are living foods that we should be eating.
I 100% agree. I think we're just kind of underestimating the food, the medicinal potential of food when we focus on calories, protein, calcium. It's just like, there's just so much more to the story. And to your point, dairy is another one that's been studied relatively, more heavily, and it changes dramatically based on what the animal is consuming. And in some dairy products, when they have really diverse forages, levels of these compounds rival things like eggplant. So it could be a significant source of these other compounds. So yeah, I'm fascinated by it as well. And I think we're just scratching the surface.
Yeah. It's exciting.
Yeah.
Is that me?
Yeah.
Okay, I can do this. So, you're passionate, as am I, about the link between diet and mental health. You suffered from anxiety and digestive issues. Can you share a little bit about your experience, how you resolved them? And then also, was there a connection, at all between those two conditions?
Oh, yeah. So I started with digestive issues, and I was told I had IBS, which is a wastebasket diagnosis. No one really know what that means. It just means I don't have any other more serious pathology. And as I got into high school, we now know there's this really amazing link between the gut and the brain, right? We have the vagus nerve. It's actually connected. What we eat becomes the parts of our brain, our cells, our enzymes. We have neurotransmitters being produced in our gut. And so it is my hypothesis that it was my gut dysfunction that was creating inflammation that was manifesting as anxiety and depression. And we now know for a subpopulation of those who suffer from depression, it is based in inflammation, or seems to be able to be reversed by calming inflammation. And in animals, we can induce inflammation or depression just by increasing the level of inflammation. And so what I did, my husband was like, oh, you're suffering. We've got to fix this. The doctors in LA, they didn't seem to know what to do with me. And so we got on the internet and we just changed our diet. It sounds so crazy simple, but basically we just eliminated processed foods. We started shopping at farmers markets. We got to know our farmers. We prioritized, the quality of the animal products we were consuming. I didn't eat candy anymore, or gluten, or dairy. I even cut out beans for a specific period of time. And so I think mine was just rooted in inflammation. And once I cleared up the inflammation in my gut and we found some parasites, I stabilized my blood sugar. There's other steps along the way, but it was 100% a huge factor in me becoming a far more stable and just content and excited and inspired person. And I think food was the very beginning of that for me, for sure.
Yeah, I have a very similar experience. And it's funny because you just reminded me, I have a friend of mine from church who asked me the other day, how are you so strict? Like, how are you so disciplined with what you eat? Like she wants to get there because for her, it's like she probably feels fine, like mentally. And like for her, it's more about like, she wants to lose those last few pounds. And I'm like, for me, that's honestly the icing on the cake at this point, because for me, it's about, I don't want to feel bad. For me, it's like, I don't want to have a migraine for 2 days. I don't want to feel anxious or depressed for the next week. So for me, it's like more than that. Like people really just, they forget that. Like they chalk it up to just like, you look great. How do you stay so regimented? And I'm like, no. It's so that I feel sane.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So
I think physical health.
Yeah, like, that's cute. Cool. I got a flat tummy. Great. We look good. But it's really like what keeps me from not doing that, and what keeps me eating, making those good decisions, is more about my mental health, my gut health too. I will struggle as well with gut issues, and just like an overall feeling of feeling good. And when you feel that, you don't want to go back. When you feel bad, like any little thing, you notice it. You're like, oh, something's off today.
Absolutely. I would have never said food mattered, but my hair was on fire, like you said. And I didn't even go in anticipating that it would change my mood. That was just like this absolutely amazing discovery that I later had to go in and figure out how it worked. But I think for me, and I think for a lot of people, I was on this blood sugar roller coaster. Even I was eating healthy, like I had a green machine juice or fruit smoothie that had 50 grams of sugar. I was up and I was down. And so I was having these biological sensations that I was attributing to mental health issues too. Like I'm up and then I'm down and I'm crying and I'm excited. And I was just kind of trying to manage, but just at the mercy of my biology, essentially.
Yeah. And, it's amazing because we tell people all the time, we weaned our boys with, paleo, and they pretty much follow a low carb paleo approach. We say fat-fueled kids because they're not exactly keto. But we're more strict with paleo with them, quality sources.
Real foods.
Yeah. And the honest truth is that our goal is not to get them to eat perfect. Our goal is for that light bulb to go off when something does go wrong and they're on their own. And it's like, instead of going directly to healthcare, it's like, what can I change in my diet? What can I change in my lifestyle? So,
that's the goal.
And it's so simple.
Because we can't control them. Like we can't control them, and I don't expect to. Like my kids will go ham sometimes. Like, but then they feel it because they take it for granted. They don't understand that they always feel good. So that is the goal, right? It's like our kids, when something goes wrong, if they do, whatever, fly off the handle and they're eating all this trash and they feel bad, they're gonna know. They're not gonna question. They're not gonna immediately say, "Oh, I need a pill," or
I have a statin deficiency.
I need to go to the doctor. I need to get on a prescription for the rest of my life. Like they're immediately, and I know it, they're immediately gonna say, "Oh, it must be something I'm eating. I need to address something in my lifestyle or in my diet, my nutrition." They do it now. They notice it. They're like, "Oh, I eat too much candy." I'm like, yeah.
What a gift, right? And I think that just speaks to the lady at church. Is like, sometimes it takes that you have to be strict for 30 days. That's what I had. And then when you go back, it's very clear, right? Because you have feel, and then you see it, and that is a gift you're giving to your children, and I love that. And but that is what it took for me. I was that boiling frog, right, in water. Like we don't even notice how many symptoms we're having if they're never gone. So yeah.
Exactly.
Now, I'm interested in what you have to say about this, because our first real deep dive into like food and mental health was Dr. Georgia Ede. I don't know if you've heard of her, but
she's wonderful.
She's amazing. So Diagnosis Diet, like that was like, we've recommended that. But, in your opinion, what are some of the, like maybe, what would you say the most protective foods for mental health issues?
Oh, they've actually done this research. Have you heard about it out of Columbia University?
Oh, I went there. That's where I graduated. I went to Columbia. That's where I graduated from.
Okay. Well, yeah.
I
Back
didn't
in
know about this.
2018. Yeah. So they had the most mental health protective nutrients were like iron and omega-3 and B12 and magnesium and potassium. But then they looked at the foods and it was really surprising. Poultry giblets, organ meats, right? Oysters. So it's basically like fish and organ meats, right? And organ meats, and then greens and colorful veggies in the plant-based category. But I was absolutely shocked to learn, that animal products play such an important role. And then Dr. Felice Jacka did some really cool research showing that grass-fed beef was protective against anxiety and depression, which was exactly countered to her hypothesis and what I think a lot of people believe. And then there was this crazy meta-analysis on, I can't remember the name of the author, but they found that in people who didn't eat meat, they had, I think, 3 times the risk of self-harm and, increased risk of anxiety and depression. And so, I think it really surprises people. But like Dr. Georgia E is showing and all this research, animal products seem to be very, very important for mental health. And I didn't eat them when I was young. And I think that was a big piece of my struggle too.
Well, I mean, when you think about the two main, I think these are two of the main categories that she breaks it down into is the inflammation, which a lot of, foods are very inflammatory. When you think of wheat, when you think of all these processed foods, they're very inflammatory. And then this energy crisis that's happening in the brain, that's the insulin resistance of the brain, so like those two things, I mean, you address them very, very well when you switch to a lower carb diet, you take out the main offenders. And then of course you keep your, you keep alert, because like we talk about lectins and we talk about, oxalates and all these things, but it's not that everybody's going to be as affected and phytic acid, but it's one of those things it's kind of like when you get your DNA read, you have this hand that was dealt to you. Your epigenetics could be showing that the symptoms associated with that mutation aren't bearing out. And that's because you probably have a healthy lifestyle. But if something goes wrong, you know exactly where to go and okay, that's methylation. I need to fix that. Same thing with these other things in these plant foods, because they could be causing inflammation, but they very well could be working perfectly for you.
It's so true, right? And I found that it's people are all over the spectrum. And when I began paleo, I found that I also had to do low carb. That was another eventual tweak that I made for me. I just don't do well with carbohydrates. I have found people can tolerate plant products, but I found a lot of people who have been chronically ill, they have diarrhea for a long time, a period of time on a primarily animal-based diet, even and going carnivore for a period of time seems to help them rehabilitate their gut so that they eventually can bring in.
They can tolerate.
And that's my goal, right?
Yes.
I think my goal for people is to eat both plants and animals. I think they have different nutrients. I think they both have benefits, but sometimes you have to go to one extreme.
Yeah. I had to do that. I had to have a period where I was very strict with carnivore. And like now I know myself. There's also, we are so blessed to live where we can do all this testing on ourselves. Like I've done like food sensitivity tests. And so it's like just knowing like, okay, if I do want to have some plants, like I know which ones I stick with, I know the ones that I do okay with if I want to.
She loves her squash variations.
My squash. Like I I eat 5 foods. That's me.
She really does. I
love it though. I don't
do
mind
too.
At all. Like I just like to eat the same stuff all the time.
Yeah.
You know what? I'm that way too. I like some people are utilitarian eaters and some people are like more extravagant fun. And for me, I'm utility as well.
Yeah.
So
yeah. I don't want to think about it. I don't want to think about it mostly during the week. I don't mind like on the weekends, like if we're going to have something fun, I might do something different, but during the week, it's more like a decision fatigue type thing for me too. Like, I'm like, no, I know how I'm going to feel. I know what I'm going to eat. I don't have to make a decision.
I love that. I eat this big green shake that everyone makes so much fun of me for doing. I do it every day. It just gets all the stuff I need. And that's just how I kind of like, I like the routine and I like
the routine.
Being able to predict how I feel, right? You're like, cool. Right.
Yeah. I love that. You want me to ask this one?
Yeah.
It just stays quiet.
I'm highlighted it for her and everything.
Okay. So Okay. So what are 2 or 3 steps that people can take today to improve their mental health?
I love this question. So there's always three things that I have people address. The first is what we talked about, identifying, what is causing inflammation for you. That's different for everyone, right? So a nice place to start, an elimination diet, sometimes carnivore works, paleo, without alcohol and caffeine, gaps. Yeah. So something like that is great. And then the second piece for me is learning how to stabilize your blood sugar. Obviously, that happens really well with carnivore, but if you're kind of waiting in the other territory, it doesn't always come with the package, right? I was hitting dried fruit really hard, still drinking juices and fruit stuff with paleo, and my blood sugar was all over the place. So something I found, people love wearing their CGMs, and it's invaluable information. And I found that I can have a lot more carbs than I thought, simply, being mindful about the amount of protein that I'm consuming at every meal, at least 30 grams. So that was good. And then the last piece that I like, there's a software called Chronometer. Are you guys familiar with it?
I use that one's probably better, but I'm just so attached to my Fitness Pal because I've been using it for 13 years. But Chronometer is what a lot of people like because there are some really cool features.
Oh, cool. I'm going to check it out.
Yeah. And I always like to tell people things they can do for free, or around free. So even if you don't do a CGM, you can test your blood sugar at home with a glucometer for like $20. And what Chronometer does really well is you can track the amount of nutrients, zinc and vitamin A, and all of those micronutrients rather than just your macros, which I think is really important because we know, magnesium, B12, omega-3 fatty acids, these are all really, really important for mental health. So taking a week out of your life and just being really diligent about tracking, where are you living, protein, calories, micronutrients, and just filling those gaps, because it can simply be that you're doing all the right things, but there are just certain nutrients that your dietary framework isn't providing that is still causing your physical and mental health to suffer. So just finding your inflammation. For me, it's garlic, which is just wild. And I had to find it through testing, but it can be any food. I've seen it for turmeric for some people. Stabilizing blood sugar, learning to stabilize your blood sugar, and then using Chronometer to plug those micronutrient gaps. And I think if you can do those three things, your physical and mental health will be better.
Are you saying garlic caused a blood sugar spike?
No, inflammation.
Oh, an inflammatory response. Oh yeah, no,
And
I had one of those tests, and like you wouldn't believe the stuff that's like things that people
You
consider
did
healthy.
the MRT.
I did an MRT, which measures inflammation. So pears was like a red food, like pear. I would have never thought that, and then like all my yellows were things that
Thanksgiving.
it was basically a Thanksgiving thing, like a turkey, maple, onion, stuff like that, right? Like you think it's fine and healthy, and I can now eat some of those foods again because you can heal your gut, you can change these things, but it's good to know. It's good to know.
No, I know. And I love that you said that these things change, because I do find it's like, it's tricky. For me, it was a very valuable tool. For some people, they get afraid of all of those foods forever. And it just like, and that isn't the goal. Yeah. And you can also like weave them in it takes like 4 days for your body to kind of deal with something. So you can eat them in rotation, or I've added I can add every food except for gluten into my diet, except for garlic. It will give me nose breakouts. It is so incredibly consistent. I don't know. And I wish it would change because my husband most of all wishes it would change because he loves garlic.
Yeah, I love garlic.
Me too.
Yes. And it's in everything.
I get
but
it,
anyway,
yeah.
Yes, just knowing it, you sometimes have to go beyond processed foods and gluten and dairy, and there could be something else in your repertoire.
And it's crazy because how you said like the garlic gives you a specific reaction. Like once I eliminated all the foods and I started testing them, it's crazy how each food gives you a different thing. Then people just chalk up these symptoms all the time. Like, oh, I guess I just feel bad today. Like, no, that's not normal. Like something caused that. Like turkey would give me headaches. Tomatoes give me a GI distress response, like different things. It's so crazy.
It is. And refined sugar gives me sadness. I mean, like
sugar and gluten is instant sadness for me. Like I don't even touch those to be honest.
I know, I don't either. And usually I'm like, I want everyone to eat all the foods, but sugar, for some reason, the next day I wake up and I just feel like, oh, I'm not doing enough. Or this just this very repetitive, similar experience I have mentally and emotionally that, like you said, we all chalk these symptoms up to just part of being alive, but I think they're like messages. I think there's a lot of wisdom if we pay attention.
For everybody, I want to reiterate the fact that like the micronutrient thing is so good because, we spend so much money. Oh my gosh, the supplement companies like make a ton of money. And don't get me wrong, I love supplementation, but like there's a reason why animal sources or not animal sources, just food sourced nutrition is the best. Because, for example, like a lot of these vitamins are fat soluble, so you're eating it with a piece of animal flesh that has fat attached to it, and there's a reason why the natural source of these things is better. Now, I will say this, just a question, maybe you would tell me, because like with MyFitnessPal, for example, there's like no quality control and there's 5 million different entries. Would you say that the micro counts are pretty dependable, or is it kind of the same thing where you have a bunch of entries and you got to try to find the right one?
Such a good point. Yes, you have to, it's like the Wild West in there sometimes. But what you do is when you're putting in your entry, look for the one with the most nutrient availability in that data and choose that one. But yes, be very, very choosy, because it makes all the difference and it can totally invalidate whatever. And know that processing, geography, seasonality, all of these things they will change the precise and exact amount of nutrients. So nothing's going to be perfect.
Not even macros. Yeah.
Not even macros. It'll just give you a really nice jumping off point. But yes, you need to be very diligent about that particular part for sure.
Yeah, that's just I marvel at that, to be honest, because it's like yeah, we're putting in that this pound of ribeye has 100 grams of fat and 100 grams of protein, and it's like this ribeye doesn't know the ribeye down the street. Like, it's like, they all have different levels of marbling, harvest times, like it's just, but, it's like, but people really feel in control. And that's why I think looking at it from these other ways and kind of connecting it to your why and being a more holistic version of it, I find is so much better. And this is coming from Ask Her. I'm a big tracker. So, all right. I love this question that I'm about to ask you because we've stopped working with companies because of the shenanigans that they do with labeling. Like there's one of my biggest pet peeves is the country of origin labeling. You can
totally mess with that.
Yeah, you can buy it from a different country, and then if it's inspected here, they can say product of the USA. So that being said, because people always look at the front, like there's a loaf of bread that's literally the exact same bread, and they put keto on it, and the people buy it. So
and it's not like wheat,
and it's literally it's the exact same thing. It's just literally keto bread, and you're like, oh, this is better. So what are some tricky labels that consumers should be aware of when it comes to animal products?
Oh, well, I love the one you brought up, the origin, made in America, right? Oh, this is so infuriating to me because most of the grass-fed beef coming into America is imported, right? And if you bring it from somewhere else, but you process it in America, you can still say made in America, which I think is awful because we want to support American farmers. We want to create food sovereignty, food security, and we want to rehabilitate the microbiome and support practices that improve environmental health, right?
And energy, like the energy it takes to fly it over. Sorry,
exactly.
I just like that on my soapbox.
Well, no,
it's
also like this is like something that when vegans, like they'll argue with us, like this is our beef with them, based, no pun intended, but it's like you're flying in out of season stuff, right. Avocados all year, like, you know what I mean? So
we have to be above reproach.
Yeah, growing in monoculture, agriculture, using pesticides and GMOs. Right. Yes, there's so much nuance to the conversation, but raised in America doesn't always mean what you think it means. So get to know your farmers, and hopefully people are pushing back against that right now, and hopefully that it will come to fruition. But know that even a lot of the other meat delivery services, they're importing their beef, and I get it because they're keeping their standards high. But again, we're robbing America of the opportunity to create a great food supply here. So that's one. Cage free and free range. Oh boy, Cage free, often just means there's still thousands of chickens in a warehouse. Free range means they just need access to an outdoor plot. They're not probably on pasture. It might even be a cement plot. It might even just be a door that they don't even know exists. And so pasture raised is a much better way to go, although regulation around that isn't always perfect either. But cage free and free range, they're kind of scary. Hormone free chicken and pork, they're not used anyway, so that's kind of silly. Grass fed can be tricky because all cows are grass fed in the beginning of their lives, and then it depends on what happens in the latter part of their life. Are they grass finished, which American Grass Fed Association certification will ensure that they are, but otherwise grass fed label will not tell you that. And there's such a myriad of different practices being used when you're finishing cattle. And so you want to check for that. Organic is interesting. So organic doesn't mean always fed grass. And they can still be fed organic grain. They can still spend a portion of their lives in confinement. And so, for me, I like to prioritize grass fed and of course, regeneratively raised when you can find it. Natural is really tricky. It means nothing, literally nothing, even though it means it can't be, you can't add artificial colors and flavors.
So that's the only thing.
But I don't like,
that's not that.
Who does that?
You shouldn't do that.
Anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then maybe the last one I like to talk about is vegetarian fed. If this is on like birds, which it often is, they're omnivores, right? So they want to be out in the fields, foraging worms and insects and stuff. So this goes against their biology and what they're supposed to be doing. And so marketers will make you think it's good, but it won't always be. Oh, and one last one. The use of antibiotics is a ever looming threat. And I think most of us recognize that. But I just read a study that showed that 15% of the cows in this designation raised without antibiotics still had antibiotics in their urine. And so getting to know your farmer, understanding their practices, and just, trying to support farmers who are not using antibiotics and who can speak intelligently about that, or you can source from places like us too, and we kind of do the dirty work, or American Grass Fed Association, or organic certification will show you that too. And they can even use used without medically important antibiotics, but still all antibiotics are kind of important. We don't want to be creating antibiotic resistant bacteria. And so, or no antibiotic residues. There's just a lot of different crazy labels around antibiotics too, that you want to be mindful of, because they often don't mean what you think they do.
Can you ask her about, do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Because I'm curious.
So,
what do you do in that?
Yeah. So I thought that was interesting when you mentioned 15%, because we spent time on a dairy farm in Ohio,
Amish country.
In Amish country, there was beautiful Jersey cows, and he's like, "Look, I will never prophylactically give antibiotics, but if I do have an animal that is sick, I will give that animal antibiotics so as to not
mastitis or something, correct?
Yeah. So he's like, so as to not spread it to the rest. Now, it's funny because in light of everything that's happened in the last 3 years, I don't even believe in the whole virology model, in the whole germ theory, and the idea that antibiotics would do something. But I'm curious, and I think what you're curious about is what's the alternative to antibiotics if you do have some sort of sickness?
Cow.
Yeah, I love that question, right? And it's interesting because dairy cattle, often fed grains, and that can maybe increase the risk of mastitis and this kind of infection. So when animals aren't using grains, then that is, sickness and illness seems to be less frequent. But antibiotics, yes, they're necessary sometimes, right? It would be inhumane to just let an animal suffer. And that is never what our farmers or ranchers are doing. If an animal requires them, they'll use them, and then they will remove them from the program. And so they'll just find a different market or home for that animal. But yeah, they would never deny them the treatment that they obviously require sometimes.
And then the other question is, are you seeing with the American Grass Fed Association, that's what it's called? Are they, because that would be something good for us to spread them, because it's great.
Yeah, because people want to know, what do I look for?
Yeah, because if you could say, everybody looks for grass finished, but like if you can just say this organization, when they say grass fed, they mean grass finished. So do they have a good amount of companies that they're working with and ranchers that they're working with, or are they still kind of in the beginning where, you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I think they're relatively well established. And it's really cool because just like a lot of these certifications and regulations are like, hey, sign this paper and tell me about your practices. But again, there can be abuses in that type of system. So organic certification and American Grass Fed Association, they visit these places. I think American Grass Fed Association is every 15 months and just verify, you know, they're feeding grass the entire length of their lives. They're not using antibiotics. And so yes, you can go to the American Grass Fed Association and you can look on their website and you can find producers and people using them. But we have been using them. That's how we kind of track things for our regeneratively raised meat delivery service. But yeah, American Grass Fed is great. The last thing I'll say on if like humane issues are a thing for you and they matter to you, those aren't often taken into consideration. And you want to look for a third-party certification for that too. Something like certified humane. You want someone to be coming in because just raised humanely, I don't believe that has any sort of legal definition.
Yeah, it's one of those like slap it on the
just
package.
The label.
Yeah,
exactly, like natural, and it's natural. Like no one's verifying that, so that's not fair. But yeah, American Grass Fed Association does.
They do it with all kinds of foods, and we've been making fun of this forever because it's funny that I think you were saying with the chicken, like, oh, you don't do that anyways. Yeah. So it's like when they put you know, low carb on the peanut butter and you're like, dude.
Right.
Or they'll put like low fat on the tomatoes and I'm just like, yeah, like
I saw gluten-free on something. Remember we saw gluten-free on something?
I think it was like something like a can of tomatoes or something.
Yeah, gluten-free like, tomatoes.
Yeah, we know. Like, but they do, it's
greenwashing.
Yeah, it's such like a marketing thing. It's just so funny when I see stuff like that. Like they totally take advantage of people in that sense.
They do.
It's sad, but okay. So this question is actually kind of, you know, because I get this a lot, especially. So, you know, one of the biggest obstacles when getting people to switch from buying conventional meat is the price, especially now, you know, everything is so expensive, which honestly doesn't even make a difference anymore.
Yeah, not anymore.
I feel like it doesn't even make a difference anymore.
It's better now.
It's better now because you can compare. Like, it's like the meat is so like pricey anyways, but how can we get people, you know, to afford high quality meat?
Yeah, that was so Paleo Valley was our first business, obviously, and we established all these relationships with these farmers, and they became like family, and they taught us about these nuances and what regenerative agriculture was and why it's important. And we kept telling people, oh, you need to source regeneratively raised meat. And they're like, well, that's cool, but where is it? How do I define it? And it's way too expensive when I find it. And so when my son came into the world and we realized, you know, we only have 60 years of topsoil left, according to certain estimates, we thought we need to create a demand for this type of product and at affordable prices. And so that's what we've done at Wild Pastures. And that's how we're different than other meat delivery services. Not only are we only sourcing regeneratively raised meats in America, but we're also making sure that they're at wholesale prices, typically like 44% less than other meat delivery services.
It's impressive.
Because,
yeah, it is.
Oh, and we have to work so hard at it, right? Yeah. There's inflation, and we're taking it. Yeah, there's both.
There's both.
But we're taking it on the nose because we know everybody, regardless of how much money you make, deserves access to high quality food, and B, we really need this to be a big movement in order to kind of transform this system that we have right now that has so many externalities or, you know, negative repercussions that we aren't always considering when we're just making price to price comparisons. Yeah. So that's Wild Pastures. We created Wild Pastures.
And I'm glad we got to because this was what I was most excited to talk about before we even got on the air, is like, you know, there are definitely, and like kudos to everybody who's getting into this game, because as it is, meat is terrible. Like it's such a hard business, you know, like refrigeration. I mean, I tried to get into it. It's like, I'm like, no, thanks, you know? But what I think you guys, and this is what Matt was telling me, and just, we want people to understand. So we already got the idea that regeneratively raised is awesome for the environment. We're waiting to see even more on how that may affect the health. But we already know, as it is, even a crappy piece of meat, to me, I always say even a bad piece of meat is better than organic quinoa. That's just kind of my personal but on the price. So Matt was telling me, and just to give people kind of a how the sausage is made. Like, so the price is basically you're able to survive because you guys have sourced in hubs, right? Like you have basically local hubs throughout the country where it's going to save you a ton of money on shipping, and you pass that on to the customers. Did I get that right?
That's 100% right. Yeah, we just started in the Denver area, and we just create these local kind of like local-ish. They can't always be local, right? Because genetically raised beef is hard to find, right? And in some areas it is far easier to do than in others, right? But yes, exactly. We create these local hubs. We use local delivery. We're using recyclable packaging, and build like solar powered facilities. And just like my husband, boy, I mean, he is so good at finding every single possible way to save money. And that's all we do every day is like, how do we make this possible for people? But yeah, delivery, not using UPS and having people just in our vans and going locally has been a game changer. And it is definitely one of the ways that we are able to keep the costs really low. And it's also just like really establishing relationships with farmers where they feel valued, they're getting a fair wage, and just creating a supply chain based on, rather than a lot of times in the traditional system, like, oh, we're just going to give you this amount of money and kind of not abuse you, but sometimes abuse you. It's just like, these are like our family members, and we work together to find out how do we bring this product to market in a way that helps people at an affordable price. So it's hard, but we do it.
Well, stay tuned, everybody. I tried, I had the skirt steak right when my package got here. It was phenomenal. You would have loved it, my love, because I actually took the time to cook it better. Because she's like, you
got to cook it right. Well, the skirt steak, you got to.
Yeah, because I like to walk my meat by the grill, like just kind of let the meat look at the grill for a second and then I eat it. So,
it's like practically cold.
I love it. That's crazy. But,
and I'm Cuban, so which I don't do this anymore. But like Danny's dad was just over here,
and
it's so bad.
Like sent it back.
Yeah, like Cubans want their meat like well done. It's so bad. Like.
Yeah.
But especially the skirt steak, honestly, that one is a meat that I like a little.
I like it. I did that. I actually did it.
It tastes good.
Yeah. But it's interesting because it's a leaner cut, but it still tastes good because of, because you get that nice char on that. You gotta
get the char.
So, but I pulled out the drumsticks and the 80-20 ground beef for today.
Okay, yeah, I saw that.
So we're gonna the boys will probably crush the drumsticks and we'll, so stay tuned for that, guys, because I gotta tell you, I love it. And I haven't been this excited for a while. Like there's lots of meat companies that we've worked with and we love them all, but I just think that
but even just making it the pricing too, like
that's always
what stops people.
You're the hero that we deserve.
Yeah, you're the hero
because we need it. People need financial relief. It's not. It's the low, like the middle class that's actually living paycheck to paycheck is skyrocketing. So,
but because of inflation, honestly, now's the best time. And so I'm glad that you're here, and we're going to be able to spread this to as many people as we can. Because I think the more people, that's what we need, right? Like to change, to actually make a dent.
Yeah.
You have to have people saying no to the other stuff to kind of make it hurt a little bit. So, and you have to have the option. So we're excited about it.
Tell us where people can find you. By the way, we loved this conversation. It was awesome. But where can people find you online?
Okay. Well, you guys can email me directly at autumn@paleovalley.com with any questions, comments, feedback, all of it. Or you can go to paleovalley.com, wildpastures.com, and then wildpasturesburger.com. We just started our first restaurant here in Boulder with our regenerative burgers. No sugar milkshakes and tallow or fries cooked in tallow and organic dressings. So if you guys are in our area, come.
We're definitely going to come by.
We would love that. And so any of those places, and of course you guys probably have links that they could go to in order to
we'll put it all in the show
notes.
Yeah
Awesome. Well,
thank you so much. Oh, we enjoyed it.
Thank you so much.